Deep within the space swallowed up by the cicatrix maledictum, close to the Eye of Terror in the galactic northwest, lies a planet and a region that once held the powers of chaos and the warp at bay for millennia. It was one of the most heavily fortified parts of the Imperium outside of the Sol system itself, perhaps even more defended than humanity's cradle, and it stood as the one true stable corridor between the eye and real space before the coming of the Great Rift. Many in fact tie the origins of the Maledictum to the destruction of this linchpin planet, the tides of the warp breaking over the now cracked defences and flooding into the galaxy at large. Now it is a dead, demon-haunted ruin, and yet there are a few who called it home that still survive and fight for their Imperium. Today, we explore the war-torn history of this world, so that even if its last citizen falls, its memory will stand in history. Welcome to Cadia, the creator of the corridor known as the Cadian Gate. This is Tactica Imperialis, and welcome to 40k Stories. The ruins of Cadia, just like the planet itself was, are located in the galactic northwest as part of Segmentum Obscurus. For those with access to pre-Maledictum maps, it's just southeast of the Eye of Terror. Any self-respecting Imperial cartographer would have clearly marked its location due to the world's significance at the time. In many ways, Cadia was quite similar to at least ancient Terra, a little further from its star as the fourth planet in system, but with a stronger gravitational field due to presumably being larger. The planet was more than capable of supporting human life with a breathable atmosphere and acceptable temperatures. With a mixture of biomes across the planet, it is little surprise that humans settled Cadia in their early days of expansion, especially since the Eye of Terror itself would not be created until the birth of Slaanesh in M30. We don't know exactly when Cadia was colonised, but I suspect sometime before or during the Dark Age of technology due to the travel issues of the Age of Strife. This version of Cadia has been all but forgotten even by those who lived there, partly due to all the rebuilding and redesigning of the planet over the millennia, but also due to what became of the original inhabitants. At some point in history, before the becoming of the Imperium, the population of Cadia worshipped the ruinous powers. Given their proximity to the Eye of Terror, I am admittedly not surprised by this at all, and even after this, all Cadians would be defined predominantly by violet-coloured eyes. The planet would play a key role in the forging of the Horus Heresy, which we'll get to in more detail shortly. But either pre- or post-Heresy, these chaos-worshipping inhabitants were annihilated by cyclonic torpedoes. Though this method of exterminatus is normally supposed to wipe out all life on a planet along with atmosphere, it seems as though Cadia itself was far less affected or re-terraformed in order to maintain its habitability. The Imperium was actually in no rush to repopulate the world, mind you, at least not immediately. In fact, it would be in M32, during the aftermath of Abaddon the Despoiler's first Black Crusade, that the decision was made to colonise Cadia afresh. Taking advantage of the stability of the region for leaving the Eye, the forces of Chaos had waltzed through to launch their invasion, and Cadia was resettled to act as a bulwark against this due to its critical location. But the Imperium got it completely wrong the first time, building in an ordered, high-Terran fashion that was practically indefensible. When the second Black Crusade bulldozed its way in, Cadia was able to hold for 5 years before Abaddon retreated with his missions accomplished, but huge redesigns were made in response to the poor layout of the cities. By the time of its fall, Cadia had truly earned the moniker of Fortress World, but it was never its defences that made it so valuable to the Imperium. In fact, Cadia's significance was never truly recognised until just before its destruction, despite being sat in plain sight the entire time. Dotted across Cadia's surface and buried underground were some 8,000 identical structures known as Pylons. These imposing edifices were forbidden to the general public, only high-ranking military personnel were usually given access. But they were enigmatic, immune to all the abilities and techniques of the Adeptus Mechanicus to try and understand them. Their purpose became clearer during the 13th and to date final Black Crusade, when a warp storm threatened to swallow up the entire Cadia system. The Pylons began to resonate in a similar manner to a Geller field, thus holding the storm at bay, and now we can work out what these things actually were. The Pylons were made of blackstone, the mysterious substance capable of amplifying or nullifying the Immaterium depending on how it is tuned and polarized. Though the Cadian Pylons were not at full power, their combined efforts along with Pylons on other nearby worlds were able to keep the entire region around them much more stable for warp travel despite the Eye of Terror being right on their doorstep. This created the Cadian Gate as it was known, the corridor of sanity to and from the Eye, and whilst Cadia was the linchpin world and system due to its placement, it was not the only one. The Gate, as it was, actually spanned 3 systems, with Cadia being the closest to the Eye, presumably meaning that any Chaos forces trying to get through the Gate would have to go through Cadia or find a different way around. In the end, the Pylons would fail and the Gate would collapse with Cadia's destruction, but again, we'll get there. As for the population, Cadia supported approximately 850 million inhabitants before its destruction. Society was unsurprisingly highly militarized due to the near-endless wars with Chaos forces attempting to breach the Gate. 10% of the populace were assigned to the Cadian Interior Guard, the planetary PDF and police force all in one. Assignment was random, however, meaning that the PDF contained some of Cadia's finest warriors, as well as those who maybe weren't good enough for the Astra Militarum as you'd see in other PDFs. The Inquisition's Ordo Malleus also seconded several Inquisitors to the planet on a permanent basis, and Cadia seemingly had its own miniature Inquisition known as the Internal Guard, a less known organisation charged with dealing with any Chaos cults that may have been active on world. In total, some 70+% of Cadians were considered underarms, with every single one of them trained to fight as part of the legendary Shock Trooper regiments, who, if you're interested, have a log all of their own in the archives somewhere. There are 2 halves to Cadia's history in many ways, the period before the cyclonic torpedoes fell, and the time after its transformation to Fortress World. In some ways, the main event of each period bookends the age of the Imperium in the galaxy as we knew it, starting with the events before the Horus Heresy and ending with the planet's fall and the birth of the Cicatrix Maledictum. We shall start with the first of these events, the beginning of the corruption of Lorgar Aurelian. Following the humiliation of the incident at Monarchia, Wordbearer's Primarch Lorgar began a pilgrimage, after much moping and consultation, toward the Eye of Terror, having been turned against the Emperor by his lieutenants. His psychic power drew him toward Cadia, a planet that had only recently been rediscovered by the Great Crusade, but that was still inhabited by Chaos worshippers at the time. There he met Ingathel, a servant of the Ruinous Powers and a Cadian native, and in conversation with her, Lorgar learned that the disparate religions, creeds, and cultures of the galaxy, including the old faith he had destroyed on his home world of Colchis, shared a common root. This primordial truth was of course the Chaos Gods, and before long the Primarch and his legion had been turned fully from the Emperor and to Chaos. The pilgrimage would continue into the Eye, guided by the now demonic Ingathel, but Cadia could easily be argued as the place where, even if the seeds of the Horus Heresy were not sown, the corruption of the Astartes took root and began to develop before blossoming decades later at Istvan. What exactly had drawn Lorgar to Cadia of all places is unknown. Yes, the planet was in service of Chaos, but likely so were many other worlds in that region due to the Eye. Lorgar claimed to have been following a voice that had drawn him to Cadia, presumably Ingathel's rather than the gods, since she became something of a herald for them. But any human could have done that on any planet, so again, why Cadia? My best guess is that the gods picked the best orator or academic, or maybe a world with a religion most similar to Colchis' old faith in an attempt to prove a point to Lorgar. Whatever the reason, it happened on Cadia. But besides the Titanic torpedoes that came much later, we don't really know anything else about the planet's place or fate in history. The second tale is much better known as well as much more recent. If there are any Cadians who should stumble across this log, then I can only apologise for what you're about to hear. In late M41, the 13th Black Crusade, the largest of its kind, crashed headlong into the Cadian Gate. Though none of the core worlds fell, all were subjected to fierce bombardments and ground invasions. A beachhead was established on outlying worlds of the Cadia system, and the naval fleets could not prevent the linchpin world from being all but at the mercy of chaos. Imperial reinforcements arrived, flooding into the gate in all manner of ways, with Battlefleet Gothic joining Battlefleet Cadia to drive the forces of Chaos's Warmaster back into the gate to contain their assault. But across the region, worlds burned and populations were annihilated by the traitor legions, demons, and more, whilst even Cadia itself was falling into Chaos hands one step at a time. The planet's cities had been redesigned following the Second Black Crusade into the Casas, maze-like urban fortresses bristling with defence and perfectly suited to the Cadian ways of war. Each of them would have to be sieged down and cracked open, but the forces of Abaddon had numbers and seemingly time to spare. Eventually, only a single Casa remained in Imperial hands, Casa Craft. Despite the tactical genius of Lord Castellan Osaka Creed and the heroics of many Imperial factions on the ground and in space, it could not hold forever against the Chaos forces. But even as Casa Craft fell, the Imperials received their greatest reinforcement yet, the Phalanx, which devastated and even destroyed the Blackstone fortress Will of Eternity that had been hanging over Cadia like an executioner. The surprising arrival of Necron Pharaon Trace in the Infinite and the coming of Archmagos Belisarius Call saw the war move into a new phase. The pair were both aware of the nature of the Pylons, implying that they were either Necron or Necron tier design, and they reluctantly teamed up in an attempt to power them up and force the warp back. They succeeded in this partway through what would become the final assault of Abaddon's forces, led by the Warmaster himself, with the Pylons able to shrink the Eye of Terror itself, such was their nullifying power. In this almost warp-free environment, the raw power of the Heretic Astartes inexorably began to dominate. Abaddon would have killed Saint Celestine without the intervention of Inquisitor Greyfax, and his attempts to kill Castellan Creed were only stopped when Celestine caused a near-mortal wound on him and forced him to retreat to orbit. At this point, the Black Legion withdrew from Cadia. The Imperium had won. They won the day. Just. But the Warmaster did not allow them to celebrate, launching the broken Blackstone Fortress parts at the world along with fire from the Planet Killer, probably the second most infamous vessel in his fleet, if not all of Chaos's fleet, beside the Vengeful Spirit. These impacts literally broke the planet. Cadia had fallen not by invasion, but by annihilation, and the Pylons' power fell with it. Though an evacuation was ordered to escape the dying world, only some 3 million of Cadia's people survived their home's destruction, around a third of 1% of the estimated populace beforehand. Some fled with Belisarius Call and St. Celestine, eventually being led to Macragge after a meeting with the Ynnari, whilst many were redeployed around the system and the gate for a time to hold the region. But in the end, it didn't matter. With the Pylons gone, the warp storm previously held back swallowed Cadia and its system, and this swarm would merge into countless others to eventually form the Cicatrix Maledicta. Many suggest that the loss of Cadia was the direct cause of the Great Rift, but it would be difficult to be certain on that matter due to other events at the time. What became of the wider Cadian Gate is unclear, but it is presumed that much of it was lost to the warp or the surge of demonic invasions that followed in the period known as the Noctis Aeterna. And yet, despite its literal destruction, the tale of Cadia does not seem to have ended there. Unconfirmed reports suggest that Fabius Bile, formerly of the Emperor's Children, may be operating in the region, hunted by forces of both the Imperium and Chaos. If these reports are accurate, and I'm not going to stick around to see if they are, the agents of Bile seem set for a showdown with the Death Guard, as well as the Talons of the Emperor and the Officio Assassinorum, all of whom will want the Primogenitor's head. What role, if any, Cadia's ruins will have in this remains unclear. Will they serve as a staging ground, a battleground, or merely a backdrop to what is to come? But time will tell whether the planet broke before even its guardians has another tale to tell. And there you have it, the tale of Cadia, for now, and the Cadian Gate. I find it somewhat fitting that a world once ruled by chaos, the place where the first of the Primarchs to be corrupted and turn to the ruinous powers would meet his fate, would in turn find its end at the hands of chaos after becoming its foremost opponent. The shock troopers who survive maintain that whilst they draw breath, Cadia stands, but in truth, their former home is naught but a ruin now, a dead demon world, floating in ruins in or around the Cicatrix Maledictum. Remember, however, that Cadia did stand, victorious in fact, right up until the spite of Abaddon saw it sundered and lost. For now, however, we must move on. Somewhere buried in the archives is a log dedicated to perhaps the most powerful and famous individuals of an entire species, as well as those who honour them. However, on reflection, as one of my first logs, I did a terrible job. So let's correct that, even if it may take more than one log to do so. Thank you for watching Tactica Imperialis, and I'll see you all again. Goodbye.